Parliament's back in session this week, so what's on the agenda? Let's take a look with Thomas Coughlan, the Herald's political editor. Thomas, good morning.
Good morning, Ryan.
The COP is this week, well, last week, this week, and I think next week. It's a very long COP, 3 weeks of COP, and this is in Brazil, obviously, and we are sending a delegation. We're also, at the same time, our government kind of tweaking the rules on climate change. How do you think it's going to go down there? Like, does anyone care?
Yeah, 3 weeks in Brazil isn't bad. It isn't a good look. Last week, the government loosened a few climate settings. The main thing they changed was decoupling the emissions trading scheme from the nationally determined contribution, which is the jargon name for the main goal that we set under the Paris Agreement. And obviously the Paris Agreement is what COP is all about. So they've decoupled the emissions trading scheme from that. Now the government obviously was elected on a mandate of making the emissions trading scheme New Zealand's main tool for reducing emissions. So decoupling those two things is a bit of an admission of defeat. Obviously, there is concern that if you do use the emissions trading scheme to fight climate change, to reduce emissions, the price of the emissions trading scheme goes up, and then everything goes up. But of course, when the cost of polluting goes up, then it creates an incentive for the polluting to go down. So it's a pretty bad look to go to COP with that. They're also going to COP with New Zealand's next Paris target, the 2030 to 35 target. Which is quite a small and unambitious target. I think it's a 55% reduction, which is only a slight increase from the one that had already been telegraphed. As to whether it plays badly in Paris, the thing is that a lot of countries are doing this at the moment. The UK, which has historically been quite a forward-leaning country on climate change, has softly backed out of an agreement to fund saving the Amazon. Obviously, the Americans aren't even part of the process anymore, so it's quite fashionable at the moment to backslide on climate change.
It is kind of in vogue at the moment. Now, let's talk about the capital gains tax that Labor's in. I mean, it's a limited capital gains tax, but are they going to respond, do you think, Thomas, to the stuff around, inflation adjusted? The inflation adjusted gains would still be taxed. Can you subtract the capital spend that you put into a home from any profit that you might make after July next year, whatever it is? Will they answer these specific questions, do you think?
Yeah, there are going to be lots of questions this week and probably every week until the election. It's a very complicated tax. There are still some big things that haven't been worked out. So the main question, which we still haven't got an answer to, is whether a future Labor government would bring in interest deductions again. A ban on interest deductions again. So you would no longer, if you had a mortgage against a rental property, you would no longer be able to claim the interest costs of your loan as an expense. And in the past, when Labor had an effective capital gains tax, the bright line test, and the ban on interest deductions, you could actually claim the interest costs against the cost of the tax that the bright line test would raise a liability for you. So if you had to pay, $50,000 bright line test tax, you could actually then deduct your interest costs against that. If you did a double ban, then it would make a great many rental properties unprofitable, which is obviously quite an unusual thing, because usually a principle of tax is that you tax things based on the profits that they make. You don't tend to tax things that are to a point where they then become unprofitable. So that is a big question that Labor's got to answer. Obviously, if you do a double ban, then you make rather a lot of money. But obviously the risk there is that you make investment in property so unappealing that you strangle off the housing recovery which we're having at the moment, and you discourage people from building more rental properties, which of course at the moment we are seeing some quite good signs in the rental market of rents flatlining and rents decreasing, and a large part of that is because people are borrowing a lot of money building houses or bringing new rentals to market because they can't sell them. And perhaps you would not, especially if you're a Labour Party, you would not want to be overseeing a policy which put up rents by reducing the number of suppliers of rentals.
100%. You would think so, but we will have to wait and see what the answers to some of those questions are, as you say, Thomas. Good to see you this morning, Thomas Coughlan, who is the Herald's political editor.